was 16. I can't remember the month, just that it was summer, and my parents had left for the weekend, which meant 2 days of absolute freedom. YouTube, video games, and raiding the kitchen whenever I felt like it. I spent almost the entire time holed up in my room upstairs, headphones glued to my ears. Being a teen alone in the house felt like permission to disappear into my little world, and I was doing exactly that. Sometime while I was in the middle of a game, I started hearing voices. At first, I assumed some background video had started playing, so I paused everything and checked. Nothing. The house was quiet except for the rain against the window. I took my headphones off and could just make out muffled speech coming from outside, like someone standing right near the house, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. The window was slightly cracked. The rain made everything sound softer and muddled. There was only one voice I could pick out, and by the time I got up and crept to the window, it stopped. An hour or so later, I went downstairs to check other windows, mostly because someone moving that close to the house at 8 at night felt wrong. Nobody was there. I grabbed a bag of chips from the kitchen and went back upstairs, telling myself I was overreacting. I was back in the middle of a round when I heard the voice again, this time through my headset, clear and oddly close, not louder but far less muffled than before. I ripped the headset off. The house was dead silent for a beat, and then the voice said my name. Luke. My full name is Lucas, but everyone called me Luke. I knew that voice had just said the name I went by. It wasn't a shout, more like someone asking casually for your attention, friendly almost. The voice itself sounded rough, like a smoker's voice, and older, maybe in his 50s. It felt as if the sound was coming from beneath me, from somewhere downstairs, maybe right under the stairwell. I set the headset down and padded to the bedroom door. I tried to open it without the hinge giving me away. The wood creaked, no matter how careful I was. Just as the door cracked, he said my name again. Same tone, not aggressive, not urgent, just calling. It made the whole thing worse. Whoever this was had somehow made the ordinary casualness of someone calling a friend's name feel terrifying. I backed off and left the door ajar, too scared to close it and risk the noise. My mind scrambled through options. Hide in the room and hope for the best? No. If he was inside, hiding wouldn't help for long. I went to the back window, eased it open further, and crawled out onto the overhang above the front porch. It wasn't a proper roof, just a sloped ledge, maybe 3 or 4 feet wide, slick from the rain. It wasn't safe. It was the only way to get out without going past whoever I thought was downstairs. That's when I realized I'd left my phone on the desk. I froze. I wanted it, for light, for to call someone, but my feet were already on the wet ledge. I crept forward, planning to snake back in, snatch the phone, and get out again. As I peered into the doorway, a shadow moved across the hall. Someone was coming. My heart slammed into my ribs. A few seconds later, I heard movement in my room, small shuffles, like someone looking around. Then his voice floated up again. Luke. Same soft, empty friendliness. I inched forward and risked a tiny look into the room. All I could see was his silhouette against the wall near my desk. He seemed to be scanning the space, probably seeing the game still open and thinking someone had to be around. Adrenaline hit me like a physical thing. That gut feeling, the one that tells you you're about to be discovered, pushed me to move. I went to the far edge of the ledge. Underneath was nothing but a bush and grass, and then about 8 to 10 feet down to the ground. I dangled my legs over, counted 1, 2, and dropped. I hit the ground hard, the air knocked out of me. My legs stung, but nothing was broken. Pain and panic made me run. I pounded on the nearest neighbor's door and screamed for help, but it was the middle of the night and people assumed a lunatic was bothering them. No one answered right away. Eventually, one house did call the police on me. Banging on their door had spooked them, and when officers arrived, I explained everything in a breathless rush. I had no idea how long I'd been out there. Later, I guessed 20 minutes. By the time the cop checked inside my house, the man who'd been in my room was gone. The officer also found my bedroom window fully open. Whoever had been there had apparently stepped out onto that skinny ledge and left. For days afterward, my legs swelled from the jump, but nothing serious came of it. The thought that I'd been just feet away from seeing the man who had been inside my house did not leave me. I sometimes wish I'd risked a peek, just to see his face and understand why he'd come in, but that's safer to say hindsight. When your life isn't on the line, it's easy to say you would have done things differently. As far as I know, he never came back. My family and I were never targeted again. I'm older now, and the memory sits like a stone in the back of my head, a reminder of how quickly ordinary things, a summer night, a paused game, a cracked window, can twist into something dangerous. I don't know what his plans were, or how close I actually was to being caught. All I know is that I got lucky, and that every time it rains and I hear a distant voice, my skin tightens and I go quiet, remembering that night and the choice I made to jump. I work as security for a small office space in town. Even after what happened, I kept the job, not because I wanted to, but because it paid better than anything else I could find at the time. Don't get me wrong, I'm done with it as soon as a better option comes along. Part of the reason I took it in the first place was that the offices sit inside a pretty upscale business park. It's a wealthy area. I assumed break-ins would be rare. I figured if anything did happen, there'd at least be cameras or on-site security nearby. That comfort helped me sleep on the decision to work nights. I clocked in at 10:08 p.m. and did the first quick rounds to bring the detection systems online, then slid into the security closet they'd given me. Calling it an office would be generous. It was basically a windowless broom closet with a desk. No natural light, no view, nothing to make it pleasant. I like to walk the hallways when I can. My official duty was to do the rounds once an hour and a perimeter walk, but I preferred checking the corridors more often. Watching grainy cameras for 8 hours straight is soul-sapping. That night it was pissing down rain, so being outside to patrol wasn't an option. The cameras fogged every time it rained, so the outdoor feeds were nearly useless anyway. About 30 minutes into my shift, an alert pinged on the monitor. Motion detected at the front camera. I pulled the feed up and could barely make out any movement through the water and condensation. It looked like someone might have been lingering near the front door, a tiny blur of motion. I grabbed my jacket and went down to the first floor to check it out in person. When I opened the front door, there was nothing, just a blur of rain and slick pavement. Whoever had triggered the alert was gone. I closed the door, reset the alarm, and told myself maybe it was a delivery driver or someone who had the wrong building. Still, it was weird someone would be hanging around an office park in the rain at that hour. I shrugged it off and headed back to my post. I'd only sat down 5 minutes when I heard a phone ring, not from the security desk, but from somewhere downstairs. Annoyed, I went to listen. The call had already stopped by the time I reached the floor where the offices were. A few minutes later, the ringing started again, and this time I followed it to the room it came from. It was a typical office space, rows of desks, most overhead lights off, the place set up for daytime workers and empty at night. In the middle of the dark room, one desk cast a small circle of glow from a lone phone screen. The display read, "Unknown caller." I couldn't shake how strange it was. Who would know the extension for a random interior office phone and call it instead of the main reception line? Why that one desk phone and not the line that would actually ring if you needed someone? I wanted to pick it up just to see who was calling, but it wasn't my place to answer company phones. If they found out I'd been answering random lines, it could cause trouble. I left it ringing. For the next hour, the phone became this annoying metronome in my head, buzzing through the floorboards whenever it rang. I tried to focus on the monitors, but the mystery was gnawing. At 1 a.m., I did a routine walkthrough of the place, 10 minutes, usual checks, and returned to the desk. I hadn't even sat when I heard a deep thump echo through the building, as if something heavy had struck in the stairwell. It set my nerves on edge. I scanned the system and saw nothing obvious, so I raced down to the first floor to double-check the doors and sensors myself. Approaching the front door, I froze. The alarm panel showed the front entrance had been put on pause. The status light was blinking green like someone had temporarily disarmed that door. I hadn't touched it. I didn't know how to put it on pause. My job only required turning zones on or off. My hands went cold. I cracked the door and peered out. Rain, empty asphalt, no footprints. I relocked it and felt more than a little unsettled. This was the first night since I'd started the post that I actually felt uneasy. I hurried up the stairwell to review the footage again, hoping the system would explain what was happening. At the third-floor landing, I stopped dead. The door leading into the office hallway was ajar, the same hallway where that desk phone had been ringing. I moved toward it quietly, every muscle taut, and then everything snapped out. My sight and hearing went black for a heartbeat. I came back to myself, stumbling backward, disoriented, with the taste of copper in my mouth. I knew with a sharp, immediate certainty I'd just been struck in the back of the head. Pain bloomed and my legs wobbled. I fell down a few steps and, through the fog in my vision, I caught the blurred outline of someone standing in the doorway. They were only a silhouette, but they were there. Panic took over. I hauled myself to my feet and barreled down the remaining stairs as fast as I could, head pounding and ears ringing. Once outside, soaked and shaking, I fumbled for the work radio clipped to my belt and keyed it to call 911. I crouched behind my car in the downpour and waited for help, every shadow making my skin crawl. I couldn't tell you exactly how long I sat there. It could have been minutes, could have been longer. But when the police swept the building, they found no one. I was taken to hospital and treated for a concussion. They patched up the bruise on the back of my head, told me to rest, and sent me home with the usual warnings. The thing that made the break-in feel different, not just some random nuisance but something more calculated, was how neatly everything lined up. Whoever did this clearly used the rain to their advantage. Fogged camera lenses made the exterior feeds worthless. They somehow knew an internal office number that wouldn't be public, calling a single desk phone in the middle of the night. And whoever it was knew enough about our security system to put a door on pause so they could get in without tripping an alarm that would scream at the control center. That's not a random thief. That's someone who planned. The hit to my head was brutal. I only saw a smear of a person before everything went dark, so I had nothing useful to give the police. No face, no clothing details, nothing. I expected follow-up questions, an investigation, a company statement. Months later, there's been no update. The company never told me whether anything was stolen, whether they even knew who was responsible, or whether they found any evidence after the fact. It's the silence that's the worst part. You keep waiting to hear something official that explains or at least acknowledges what happened, but there's nothing. I'm still working there for now, looking for a way out. Every creak of the building turns my head. Every time it rains, I get jumpy, and I check the panels like it's cardio. I'm more alert than I used to be, scanning for any tiny anomaly in a feed or an odd blinking light on the alarm. I don't know if they'll ever catch the person who did it, and I don't know what they wanted. All I know is that someone with specific knowledge came into that building, hit me hard enough to knock me out, and walked away into the rain. That thought keeps me up sometimes, replaying the silhouette in the doorway over and over, so close to seeing a face and left with nothing but the memory of the thump and the wash of cold rain. A few months ago, my buddy Thomas came over and we were just planning to kick back for the night. Neither of us had to work the next day, so beers, dumb jokes, and whatever came on YouTube was the plan. By 10, I offered him the couch. He still lived with his folks, so crashing at my place was his escape sometimes, and we even started making plans for the next morning. Before he drank too much, he said he'd run home for a couple of things since he didn't bring extra clothes. The drive would be 5 minutes tops, so I stayed put on the porch for a bit, though I must have dozed or gotten distracted because I didn't even notice the storm rolling in until later. I ended up back inside on the couch, scrolling my phone and nursing a beer when a knock hit the front door. I swung it open expecting Thomas and nearly spilled my drink. Standing there was this tall guy, all in black and soaking, dripping rain onto my doormat. He gave me this weird, tired smile that put me on edge right away. If I hadn't been expecting Thomas, I would have checked first. That's my usual. But because I was waiting, I just opened it. Big mistake. The man stuck one foot in the doorway and didn't move. He looked like he'd been in the rain forever, hair plastered to his forehead, clothes clinging. I blurted out that I thought he was someone else and reached to close the door. He kept his foot put and just smiled. There was this slow, awkward standoff for a few seconds. He didn't speak. I was tipsy enough that my brain stalled on what to say. Finally, he stepped back and let me close the door, still smiling like it was nothing. I laughed it off and texted Thomas something half-joking about a creep outside, thinking that was the end of it. I waited longer than I should have. 15-20 minutes passed. Worried about the storm, or maybe thinking Thomas had gotten stuck, I peered out the window and saw his car parked on the curb. Relief, until I opened the front door and realized he wasn't in it. The engine was off and there was no movement. I called his cell and watched a light flash on in the car, so I knew the phone was inside. My stomach dropped. I walked out into the downpour and yelled his name, but the rain buried my voice. It wasn't until the cold soaked through my shirt that I remembered the soaked guy at my door. The possibility that he'd done something to Thomas slammed into me. I ran back inside, locked the door, and peeled my shoes off. That's when I realized the house felt wrong, quieter, and the hallway lights were off. I could have sworn I left a couple of them on. I crept down the hall and my heart almost stopped. Along the wall, pressed flat as a shadow, was a figure trying to blend into the darkness. For a second, I thought my brain was playing tricks from the beer and the adrenaline, but then the man moved, calm, confident, the way someone who knows exactly what they're doing moves. He raised an arm and I saw the glint. At first I couldn't make out what it was, but the way he held it made my blood run cold. I didn't stick around to identify it. I turned and ran so fast I almost tripped on the mat. I didn't think, I just ran, out the front door and as far away as I could. I hid under a stranger's porch down the block, soaked and shaking, and called the police. From that spot I could watch my house through the rain. A few minutes later, 2 officers walked up calmly, but then everything escalated. They leveled their weapons and bolted inside. I watched them sprint through the doorway and then out the back after someone. They chased the intruder over a fence and into the storm, but he vanished into the sheets of rain. While cops searched the property, officers found Thomas about 5 minutes later, but he wasn't where I feared. He'd been shoved into a car down the street and tied up, terrified and soaked, but alive. Apparently, the guy had held him at gunpoint as he pulled into my curb, forced him into another vehicle further down the road and left him there. After that, the intruder came back to my place and slipped inside while I was running around looking for Thomas. When I saw him raise his arm in the hallway, he wasn't holding a flashlight or a phone. He had a gun pointed at me. If the light had been better, if I'd had the sense to look twice instead of sprinting, I don't know what would have happened. Running probably saved both our lives. The car the attacker used was stolen earlier that night, so it was a dead lead. The storm masked everything: footprints, tire tracks, even sound, and the guy disappeared into it. There were no witnesses who could identify him and no trace to follow. We were left with nothing but the memory of that smile, that steady movement, and the flash of metal in his hand. Police did what they could, but the storm made evidence vanish. They speculated he targeted my buddy because his car was alone on the curb, or maybe it was random. The whole thing felt like somebody picked the night for the weather and for the chaos to help them disappear. For a while after that, every knock at the door made my chest seize up. Every car idling down the street had me running to the window. We still have no idea what he wanted or why he chose us. Maybe he was casing the neighborhood. Maybe he was after something else entirely. We'll never know. The only concrete things are that Thomas was found alive, tied up but okay, and that I nearly walked into a man with a gun right inside my own house. That image of him in black, smiling through the rain, presses at the back of my eyes whenever a storm comes through. I can tell you this much: I don't leave my doors unlocked anymore, and when it pours, I watch the street until the storm clears.